Hello, America. Dave Hodges here, host of the Common Sense Show. We are the show that's freeing America one enslaved mind at a time. Thank you so much for joining us. We defend God, family, country in that order, and we do it pretty aggressively. And we need to do it aggressively because we are under attack in all three areas. And we also have a special place for the oppressed. And right now, humanity, sometimes just the American people, but it's humanity that's now being oppressed and is being oppressed by the tech bros. And you need to hear this and hear this clearly. I've talked a lot about Palantir, but it's beginning to take shape. The dots are connecting. And I found things that individually were upsetting and concerning. We've talked about the outgrowth of 24/7 surveillance in every location that you're at. And we've talked about that. We've talked about Palantir and and we've talked about flock cameras. But the reality is this, is that we now have the ability to look at a comprehensive story. And we're going to go through and we're going to look at how Palantir began. I'm just going to do it superficially. And it should concern you. And it should concern you for four very valid reasons I'm going to give you here. But we're not going to just stop with this particular segment. We're going to continue this into other segments when we look at the key players, who influence them, what's they're about, what they say about God, family, country. And we need to be on alert. And we're not supposed to be just passive recipients. We're in the Ephesians 5:11 business, and I would encourage you to look that up, and you'll have a better understanding of why I do what I do. Um, in many of our ventures, money's flowing in good, and I'm happy because I'm able to give a higher amount to my church. Um, I can help relatives with certain issues. In this venue, Uh, except for our podcast and radio network, yeah, we're repressed. And they say that when you're over the target and taking flack, you're over the target, definitely, and we are. Anyway, we are brought to you by a product that's changed my life, a series of products actually that have changed my life, and I want to bring it to your attention again. And I can't talk about this too much because a lot of you still don't have this. You've thought about it. Yeah, I'd like to have optimal immune system functioning. I'd like to have my joint pain be diminished and eventually disappear because this product grows pluripotent stem cells. I'd like to be able to treat cuts and burns with an emergency cream that works better than just about anything else. Peer-reviewed studies show all this and more. And we have three bottles of the Nanosoma liquid spray that boosts your immune system to unbelievable levels. And if you go to iwantmyhealthback.com/Dave Hodges, you'll see before and after pictures, not just case studies. You're also going to see scientifically how the product works. And the same thing is true for the gel that grows pluripotent stem cells and reduces inflammation and pain in your joints. Took me 6 weeks to notice a big difference, 8 weeks before I don't have any restrictions now. Now, I don't want to go crazy. It doesn't mean you can't tear an ACL or a rotator cuff, but in terms of joint pain, it's almost non-existent for me. Occasionally, cold morning, I'll get up and I'll feel, oh, that's a little twinge, but it doesn't affect anything I do. It's almost like being 30 again, and I mean that sincerely. Sometimes, and I'm not bragging, but I'll work out on the heavy back, right? And I throw with some power when I get warmed up. And people look at me, how could that old man do that? And I've had people ask me that. Well, I wasn't doing this 2 years ago. You can have the same resurgence I have. Go to iwantmyhealthback.com/Dave Hodges, 15% off the retail price for the starter pack. Okay. Long intro there in the beginning because I wanted to set the stage for what you're going to hear. Palantir was named, and a lot of people know this, after the Lord of the Rings, and it was all-knowing, could see things at a distance, total surveillance, mind read, and if you looked at it long enough, it made you go crazy. Well, what we know now is AI obsession leads to psychopathy. Now research coming out on this. It's also true for kids that play video games too much. So this is that was kind of a foretelling with the Lord of the Rings. Now, who was their first major client for Peter Thiel? I'm not getting into his background. And a lot of people like to attack his preferences, his lifestyle, and so forth. No, I'm going to look at his attitude towards humanity, and I'm going to look at his business practices, and then the people he surrounds himself with in the upcoming segments. Because I want there to be no doubt where this is going in their minds. It doesn't mean that they're going to be successful, because the worst thing that they did for their own plans was allow flock cameras to go everywhere. Because now people are upset. And in the AI data centers, that's raising conscious awareness too. And they want to keep you dumbed down. They want you to fight with each other. They want black versus white, gay versus straight, atheists versus Christians. I mean, they want all the divisions to focus on each other and not look at them. Well, they're losing that battle when it comes to Flock and AI data centers. They've made a huge mistake. But let's look at who their first client was. And this may actually really interest you and surprise you. It was In-Q-Tel. You say, what's that? In-Q-Tel. That would be CIA fundraising, which they're not permitted to do. They break the laws. They're not supposed to operate on the continental United States, and they do that too. Um, but In-Q-Tel connected to MK Ultra interests. The congressional hearings led by Anna Paulina Luna, who didn't go far enough, and I think she has collars put on her. She should have called people like Kathy O'Brien and Juliet Engel, Dr. Juliet Engel, who I've interviewed in other forums, and they were two of the prime witnesses. And Juliet was an operative. In fact, actually, so was Kathy. They were forced into being operatives, spies, if you will, in the MK Ultra program for blackmail. And they weren't called as witnesses. Now, they had two guys that testified who were researchers that did a good job. And Kathy, and when I talked to Kathy and Juliet, they praised them, but this is evil. Palantir married the devil when they joined in with In-Q-Tel. Okay. Now, unified all intelligence. Palantir developed the ability to have data talk to each other, even using different platforms and formats. And they moved away from what we call symbolic AI to more organic. It's kind of like growing a baby. This is why they have the data centers, at least one of the reasons, because they're studying us to train AI. And they admit to that. That's not controversial. Um, In-Q-Tel is part of that. But what they did after 9/11 was they took all these technological advancements and said, we can unify all intel and we can begin to locate terrorists. We can tell you when they're going to do what they're going to do. And we can give you preventative means to predict and interdict. And our government said, yeah, and heck yes. And this led to the Patriot Act that gave them unbridled access to our data. They basically went to the Circus Court. Notice I didn't say circuit, I said circus because of the weird and unconstitutional decisions they make. And they got uh, the judges to rule in favor of Facebook that was taking participants' data that should be theirs and selling it with no compensation to the origination source. That's like stealing lyrics from a song or harmony from a song and then making it your own. That's exactly what Facebook did with data. Now everyone's doing it. Your data, I believe, belongs to you. It's your property. Shouldn't be the property of anybody else because they interact with you. So if someone comes to your house, interacts with you, do they own your house? So we look at this, and so we had a unification of all intel and unlimited gathering of private information, one for marketing purposes, which we see. Sit at your dinner table and say, yeah, I wonder what Hawaii is like this time of year. And all of a sudden, all your telephones start giving you ads, right? Okay, exactly. All right, now let's take a look at their CEO, Alex Karp. This guy is like a cartoon character, and I don't mean that in a derogatory, insulting way, but you can't connect with him on a human level when he talks. And he's got a rather unconventional appearance, and he's just a different person. Well, let me tell you what this different person studied after he left Stanford as being a roommate of Peter Thiel. Now he's the CEO of Palantir. He went to Germany and he took philosophy and he was mentored by a neo-Marxist. And you say, well, why is that important? Well, it's important because it guides Palantir's philosophy, and Palantir is running major portions of the US government. They're making major policy decisions for the White House. I have told you we are in danger of corporate takeover and government becomes an administrative arm of the corporations. And we're already seeing the witnessing of that effect. But remember, the advances that came along don't advance human liberty. They like to say, oh, yeah, we like the flock cameras because they keep us safer. We solve some crimes over here. But I just go back to what Benjamin Franklin said. Good old Ben, what did he say? Those that would give up liberty for a little bit of security will get and deserve neither. And I couldn't agree with that more. And this is what we're being sold. And we go, yeah, okay, if it makes it a little safer, I'll give up some of my rights. Well, when does this encroaching stage 4 cancer stop? See, there is no limit. Once you open the door, you've let the enemy in, and the enemy is your freedom, your liberty, and ultimately for a lot of people, I think it's your life. Let's take a look at four advances that should give everyone great concern in terms of where this is going. And I could give you 20, but I'm just going to give you a few of the top ones here. Number one, they want the ability to surveil you all the time. And let's go back and talk about do they have the technology to do it? Oh, undoubtedly. Your Alexa spies on you. Samsung TV's been sued for, yeah, you got the idea. Anything that emits electrical signal can be commandeered to spy. That's not a secret in Intel. It's not really even a secret in corporate America anymore. So anything can be tapped into. Heck, they got infrared now that when the police pull up outside, they can tell you where people are in the house, if it's a man or a woman, how tall they are. It's amazing the technology. Okay, so what they got into was these algorithms that track everybody, everything, and then they have AI that synthesizes trillions of bits of data, and they get into predictive policing. And I remember when the movie came out with Tom Cruise, and it was about predictive programming, predictive policing. Arrest people before the crime occurs. Boy, was that a predictive programming movie because this is exactly what they've done in New Orleans. Oh, here's what they say. Well, we saved crime and we guarded civil liberties. How can you spy on everybody and say you guarded civil liberties? You can't. That's a lie. And then they say, well, we've discontinued the program. Well, they renegotiated. So when the furor came up among the New Orleans citizens, oh, yeah, yeah, we're going to do away with this. It's okay. Go back to sleep now. The reordering of this technology came back in a different format with different names, same people. They're still doing it. And this is spreading all across America. And they decide where to station police, who the suspects largely are, and we keep surveillance on those people, extra surveillance. That's a violation, one, of due process because you don't have probable cause to do that. Number two, it's a violation of search and seizure. It's a definite violation of the Fourth Amendment. But we just sit by and we're letting it happen. Now, people, like I said, are waking up to some degree. Let's go to number two. They want to track everyone everywhere. Now, I understand the business reason for it. I don't agree with letting them do it, but this is the more benign reason, if there is a benign quality to this. And the benign reason would be, well, they're going to keep us safe, and we're going to stop John Q. Public from committing a crime or arriving there at the time he commits the crime, or be able to catch him right after the fact so he doesn't commit another crime of that type. Um, no, no, don't want that. And you know where this technology came from? It was perfected in Afghanistan. They chose 10 villages at first, they being the Pentagon. They employed the Palantir technology to surveil from hovering craft. And they surveilled 10 cities, everybody. If Muhammad, for example, had misplaced his goat, forgot where he left it, they could have told him. Everything was surveilled. They knew when you went to the bathroom. They knew when you had sex. They knew when you ate. And this has now come out in Freedom of Information. Well, if they can do that in Afghanistan, how do you know they're not using this technology and not telling you they're not doing it in America? Well, they are. They are. Now, why did they do it in Afghanistan? And this should give you concern because they wanted to isolate people that they perceived as a threat and then eliminate them. Keep that last phrase in mind because I'm not saying it's happening. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm saying we have opened that door for Americans because who's the enemy? If you're MAGA, remember Biden in his famous 2022 speech on September 1st walks out with the Marine Corps, dimly lit red lights, looked like a satanic temple. And he said, MAGA is terrorism. MAGA is the enemy, and we need to deal with MAGA. Remember that? MAGA, make America great again. Oh, so if you're for the Constitution, you might believe in God. If you're for anything in terms of putting restraints on government in the name of constitutional republic law, then you were a terrorist, according to Joe Biden. Today, if you're a communist, you're a terrorist. I got news for you. I don't like communism. I don't care for Mandami. He's dangerous. The socialist Democrat leaders that are really communist, they're dangerous for their communities. Communism never ends well. But under our law, you have the right to be a communist. You don't have the right to victimize people, but you have the right to have your belief. And now people with certain belief systems are being categorized as terrorists. In fact, the head of Flock was interviewed, and here's exactly what he said. If you oppose Flock, you're a terrorist. With the influence the tech bros have on government, I showed you a clip where a man had organized a protest on the sidewalk and street in front of a city councilman's house who was promoting data centers that were taking water, driving up utility rates. And this guy said, I've had enough. He goes on Facebook. He doesn't say we're going to harm him, we're going to trespass, we're going to block his path, we're going to make it impossible for him to live his life. We're just going to let him know we're watching you and your political career is at stake. Those are all legitimate activities under our Constitution, redress of grievances. He's a public figure. He's elected. They had the right to do what they did. You know, you can question, is it good taste to go to his house? If they don't cross onto his property and they don't block his path, and they're done at 10 o'clock at night and don't start till 6 in the morning, it should not be illegal. But this man was arrested for stalking and other forms of harassment, and they made it into two felonies. And what was he doing? Opposing this technology. In fact, the FBI, you've seen this floating around the internet, I'm sure. There's a DHS document that says that for protesting AI centers, data centers, you are a domestic terrorist. So going back to time frame, MAGA under Biden, you were a terrorist. Today, if you oppose 24/7 surveillance of you, if you oppose your utility rates like mine go up 17% because Arizona Public Service is draining my pocket to pad the pockets of AI data center owners. They're gulping our water by the gallons, and saying that makes me a domestic terrorist. You're blocking progress. Well, yeah, I am. For the people that want to make money off of this at our expense, and the people who are suffering at their expense have the right under our laws to speak up without being labeled and surveilled. But they're creating lists right now. We have found that out as well. This should trouble every one of you, because what does history tell you? When lists are created and legitimate public protest is sanctioned, where does this end up? Lists have given America and the world its darkest moment. We had the McCarthy years in America, right? And we had Hitler, Mussolini. I could go on and on with these examples, but you know your history, I hope. You were taught your history. But in Afghanistan, they had crazy surveillance. They could do the same to us, and I believe it's probably happening. In fact, some people tell me they put the evidence out. I'm going to have to look at that. Okay, this has also become part of warfare. Now, this may be a positive thing. If you think Russia's invasion of Ukraine was unwarranted and that Palantir's technology to specifically target artillery and drone strikes to specific high-value targets and not waste the resources and to be maximally effective, you say, well, that's a good thing because Ukraine has fought off total invasion and consumption. I agree. They have. You can argue with Russia, and I'll tell you why Russia did what they did. They knew that NATO was and the EU was going to make Ukraine a member, and that would have meant nuclear missiles could go in close to Moscow. And it was their version of the Cuban Missile Crisis, and they weren't going to take it. That's what motivated Putin. And there's another motivation for Putin too, and I recognize that. He wants to reconstitute the landmass of the old Soviet Union. He said that, and that's obvious. But this was a direct military threat to Putin. And if we hadn't intervened with Palantir technology, Ukraine would have already been conquered. So you could argue that was a good thing. But warfare has become unbelievable. And we have super weapons, I've been told, that the public doesn't know about, that Trump is actually thinking about unveiling. The reason he hasn't, he doesn't want China and Russia to see it. I think as good as the spying has been and the betrayal by Biden with China, for example, I think they already know it. He's going to be using super weapons. And guess where the technology came from? Palantir. Continuing. We live in a society in America that's increasingly accepting the Canadian ethic of euthanasia. Euthanasia is murder, state-sanctioned murder by any term. People who are suicidal are, by definition, mentally ill. And that means that the state, whether it's like New York or Washington, or two states that have moved in this direction of Canada, the state is getting into the suicide business, forced suicide. In Canada, there's questions whether or not how much say people have. And when you're mentally incompetent enough to consider doing away with your life, particularly when you're young, you really want to trust the state with that decision? How do we know that politics or religion or race or some other demographic doesn't enter into the decision by the state? And we're looking at people that endorse euthanasia. The tech bros endorse it. And we want to give them total control over our society with their digitization, their tokenization of assets. And they have these beliefs. And remember, go back to Karp, neo-Marxist mentor in his philosophy program in Germany. This should concern everybody. If you stop and start absorbing the direction this is going, number one, there's nothing Christian about this. It's the antithesis of Christianity. And number two, it's anti-American. It's anti-Constitution. And then there's another element here. We're already seeing questionable treatment of marginalized groups. And how does a society get rid of its undesirables? They incarcerate them. And history shows eventually they'll do away with them. Now, we're not into the doing away with business if you take the euthanasia part out of it. But if you look at things like Utah and 8 other states that are voting on this, Utah now has homeless detention. And I did another story on that yesterday because I knew this was coming. You sleep in your car at Walmart. Now, the truckers, they can do it, but if you're a car, you can't do it in a lot of communities. You're a vagrant. And in Utah, it's a $500 fine, first offense. Well, if people had $500 to throw away to the government, they still wouldn't have a place to live. And if they had $500, they probably wouldn't be sleeping in their car. But they're declared homeless. And when you can't pay your debt, where do you go? You go to jail. Now, a lot of times they won't sentence you to jail on first offense in Utah. It's second offense. First offense, $500 fine, possibility, 6 months in jail. Doesn't happen most of the time. Second offense, $1,000 and 6 months mandatory. And what do they do when they're in jail? They do forced labor. Well, it's not for the state. They're not paving roads. They're not cleaning trash off the street like we've seen prisoners do before. They're making products that Fortune 500 companies can use. And this started under privatized prisons under George W. Bush. This is not new, but this is now part of the homeless population. So if you're unfortunate enough to be homeless in the greatest wealth redistribution in American history, where 65% of our people can't afford a $500 car repair bill, but if you're a victim of this, you get the privilege of being confined and being used as slave labor. And it's the high-tech bros that are setting this up. They're setting the system up for surveillance. Doot, 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 doot. Hey, guy sleeping in his car at 5th and Logan. This is happening already. You wonder how they find people sleeping in their cars? This is one of the ways. And they work to benefit the elite when they're incarcerated. This should have you up in arms, figuratively speaking, of course, lest it be said I'm encouraging violence, which I'm not. But what I am encouraging is clearing the deck of all politicians that think this is a good idea. You are in election season in a lot of states, 1/3 of the Congress, all of Congress, excuse me, 1/3 of the Senate. And if you don't think they're doing a good job, you need to get rid of them. I was going to encourage people to vote for Rand Paul until I found out he voted for the merger of the American and Israeli military. What? That didn't happen, Dave. You're just making that up. Okay. Go to the NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act, pull up section 224, and it's as plain as day. In fact, Thomas Massie and Ro Khanna, Republican, Democrat, they tried an amendment to do away with 224 and this merger, and it couldn't even get a hearing. You don't matter. This is where we're moving. And right now, I should have your attention, but I'm not done. I hate to tell you, this is just the intro to what gets worse. Now, number one, what can you do about it? And I'll say this again after every segment in which I talk about this. Number one, you should be praying about it. You should pray for our leaders that they make wise and discerning decisions that benefit the people. They have a servant mentality, not serving themselves, serving the people that elected them. If they don't, we should ask that justice be done and they're removed from office, either from their scandal or more commonly from the electoral process. And you should pray that the electoral process is fair and honest. And I heard a newscaster yesterday, He said, well, that candidate that's running here in Arizona, and this guy was a primetime news broadcast on a major Arizona station on Channel 3, and it was Jared Dillingham. I'll name him. He said, and that guy is an election denier. Like, there's never been a problem with an election, Jared. What planet have you been living on? Did you even see the congressional testimony that when they covered this, not once, not twice, but three times? Nothing happened, but facts came out. Did you not see Carrie Lake's court case? I think she proved her case. She certainly showed impropriety, and the court didn't object. She still lost her case because her position was unpopular, and the ruling wasn't really ever justified legally. It was just like, no, 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 you didn't prove your case. Well, she did, because if she didn't, the defense did not counter her arguments, and the judge did not throw it out. So, Jared Dillingham, maybe you want to get an education and start looking at things. How common this is the debatable aspect of this. And I admit it's debatable. And I'll give you one fact in Arizona. You can say, oh, this is just a coincidence. But I'm going to give you what the hardcore fact was that no one refutes. I mean, even the county supervisors, who I believe were as corrupt as the day was long in Maricopa County with regard to this issue, four of them, not five, but four of the five. When the polls opened, and I had one of my best friends and my relative affected by this, they go to vote in dominant Republican districts. That means 50% plus one Republican registered in that district in Maricopa County. And in 56% of the machines didn't work. Oh, hey, fill out this paper and drop it over here in the box. What could go wrong? Now, fortunately, my relative and my friend, we're not playing that game. We know how that can work. So they went to another center. But what about people who had to pick up their kid for a dentist appointment and didn't have an extra 2 hours to go stand in line because of the overflow crowd at a center that was not affected? Now, that was Republican. 56% of the machines failed in Republican dominant districts in the 2022 midterm in the gubernatorial election that involved Katie Hobbs and Carrie Lake and a bunch of other officials. In the Democratic dominant districts, Democrats 50% plus one, guess how many voting machines failed on a percentage basis? That number would be 0%. These were facts that were presented in case and unchallenged. The excuse they used was the run-back papers that they used, opposed to another set of papers, is what caused the malfunction. So why would you use different papers in voting machines for Republicans and different ones for Democrats? Can someone explain the logic? Jared Dillingham, can you explain that to me, Channel 3 anchor? Can you please explain to me how that could happen, how that even makes sense? So I go back to, can we vote our way out of this? I don't know. But I do think we can pray our way out of this. If enough people repent and we do the right thing and we pray in mass, things could change dramatically. So people say, what's the surefire way to change things? Well, revolution doesn't necessarily change things. And in today's day and age, I think that'd be very difficult. And I don't encourage it because it doesn't go along with my values. But number two, okay, voting your way out of it, I think there's enough reason to suspect that may not work, even if the will of the people is behind some kind of change. If it's not popular with the elites, you're going to meet major resistance and obstacles. Number three, the will of God, and you invoke that power on your side. That's how you bring change. And it's happened. I'm actually going to present you a study that was done by a guy named Dr. Chen based on research that Grok did. And I don't take Grok seriously with Christianity, okay? But I will tell you that on this instance, Dr. Chen showed, and what they studied was really interesting, and I'll give you a teaser because I'm going to do that later this week. It was looked at miracles that happened following prayer. And what were the elements in prayer that were in common with all the other prayers that led to a miracle? And it's pretty remarkable research. And it parallels how we're told to pray in the Bible. And there are prayer studies, like there's about 16 of them at my last count, that shows that prayer works in controlled studies. They haven't done enough to reach what we call a level of significance, P equals less than 0.05. That means your results, if done over and over, would produce results that would be due to chance by less than 5%. Okay, there's my research disclaimer on this. And I used to teach this. So this is something I know a lot about. And no one's really wanting to fund this research. And you have to ask yourself why. I'd like to see more of this research done, wouldn't you? Well, Dr. Chen said, in this instance, Grok was right. Here are the elements of successful prayer. And then we trace it back to what Paul said. Peter has alluded to a lot of these things. Jesus talked about a lot of these elements in the Bible. And I'm going to be presenting that later in the week. But I think this is the way out of this mess. There's no question as I go through the day, Palantir is not your friend if you're an average person. And the society that they want to create, as you're going to see, is not one that you're going to want to live in. It's every day will be a struggle for you, particularly if you've grown up in an American society. The shock will be unbearable for most people. And I don't trust that they'll maximize society to encourage longevity for its citizens, at least not the desired ones. Dave Hodges here, host of the Common Sense Show. Stay tuned because we're going to do a whole lot more. Thanks for joining us.